боятся Запрошуємо вас завершувати спілкування за кавою та займати свої місця, оскільки за 5 хвилин ми будемо
We invite you to take your places because just in a couple of minutes we are going to start the main part of our event.
займати свої місця. За 1 хвилину розпочинаємо наш захід.
Dear participants, in 1 minute we are starting our event.
Шановні учасники,
Dear participants of our forum, we greet you at an event which is called Labor Market Restoration and Competitiveness of Ukraine. My name is Anastasia Baklan. I'm the head of projects and partnerships in Helvetas, and for me it is a great honor to moderate today's event. The forum is organized by Helvetas in partnership with the State Employment Service of Ukraine and Federation of Employers, under the aegis of Resilience Project for the development of sustainable inclusive labor market in Ukraine, which is implemented in cooperation with SIDA and Helvetas with the support of Sweden. We have gathered today so that we could look today at the labor market in Ukraine through the prism of restoration and competitiveness, and also to present the results of the biggest survey among businesses about their demands for skills and qualifications. This survey became possible with the support of the project restoration of financial and social sustainability of citizens affected by war in Ukraine, which is financed by the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, BMZ, and also implemented by Helvetas in partnership with JAM. We have two panel discussions in the forum. The first panel is dedicated to the survey data used for forming state decisions in the field of labor market education, along with representatives of the government, parliament, the State Employment Service, and the National Agency for Qualifications. We'll discuss key trends and answers to HR challenges. The second panel is concentrated on human capital and transformation of the workforce. In the dialogue with business, we'll talk about efficient models for preparing people, the balance between skill development and automation. Today's forum takes place in the shelter for the security reasons. So in case of air raid, we are going to continue our work in a safe space. The forum takes place in a hybrid format with online broadcast and simultaneous interpreting into Ukrainian and English languages. As they tell me, we already have more than 50 participants joining from different countries of the world, so we sincerely thank you for being with us. We also have a coffee break during the forum. The main part is going to finish until 1:30. Afterwards, we invite you for coffee and final networking. I would like to point out that on the reverse side of your badge, you can find a QR code which leads to the folder with forum materials. You can download the forum's agenda and also the presentation, both in Ukrainian and English languages. For online participants, the link to the materials is in the comments under online broadcast. Full version of the survey will be available in the nearest time and will be separately sent in an email to all registered participants. Now, to officially open the forum, I have the honor to give the floor to Yulia Zhovtyak, Director of State Employment Service in Ukraine, and Petra Bashe, Director of Helvetas in Ukraine. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone present here, and both in the room and online for State Employment Service. This is the second year of a full-scale survey, the biggest survey of employers, which we conduct together with the support of Swedish government, Helvetas, SIDA, Federation of Ukrainian Employers. And I can say one thing. I would like to thank, first of all, to all our partners, to thank our team of the Employment Service from all over Ukraine for the work we all did, And I keep repeating that such surveys, they are an opportunity to look at the real result of work of our enterprises in Ukraine today. And this is a roadmap for the State Employment Service, what to work on the following year. Thank you.
In English, so if you don't know me, my name is Peter. I'm the country director of Helvetas. So I remember about 1 year ago we were presenting the previous version. Now, when we meet before the Christmas, I want to use this as an opportunity to little bit look this year, which we all had, and I think it was a very hard year actually. You know, I am in Ukraine since the start of the large-scale invasion from 22. I was here all the winters and all this time, and this year I think it was pretty hard for the country, for the people, and I think for many of us. But we achieved, I think, a lot. And we delivered, together with the government partners, a lot of good results. I see Olga from the parliament. We managed to get through this vocational education law. I'm very proud for that. Now we have a lot of work ahead to make it actually implemented, bring it to the schools and Helvetas all over the Ukraine. As Helvetas, we work on infrastructure. We were building the houses, water infrastructure. We train the people, adults, women, youth, people with disabilities. And we can do all of this thanks to the partnership, and especially with our government partners, also with the Federation of Employers, with the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Veterans that will join us as well today. So I would like to say big thanks to all Ukrainian hardworking people, the people in the government that really do their best under these conditions. I would like to actually sometimes really hug you because you do such an amazing job. So let's now look at a bit the future. I think we have a lot of work ahead, but we from the international community, I think we need to even do more for Ukraine. And as Helvetas, we will do our best to use the funds which we have to generate the biggest value, the value for money for this country, and to bring the analytics and the knowledge to the donors, so the work which is done makes sense. It's not just money spent. So once again, thank you, and let's get to the results.
Thank you, Peter.
Щиро дякуємо, Петро. Запрошуємо.
Thank you, Peter. We invite you to take your place in the hall. And now we're going to move to the presentation of results of our survey. As has been said, along with the State Employment Service and Federation of Employers, Helvetas has been doing a national survey of labor market in Ukraine for a third year in a row. For us, it is essential to have regular evidence to understand the situation, because labor market in Ukraine is extremely dynamic. It changes under the influence of war, recovery, immigration processes, and structural transformations in the economy. So that is why it is important for us to see those changes and their progress. So yes, we see the screen, but for some reason the clicker doesn't work. The following slide, please. Yes, now it works. Okay. So, this study this year is actually being conducted since 2023. This year it has been conducted in September, October 2025, actually with the support of the programs, support of recovery and financial stability of communities affected by war in Ukraine, which is financed by Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany, BMZ, and implemented by Helvetas Inter-Cooperation in partnership with JERO. So the purpose of our study is to hear the voices of business and to objectively document which special skills and qualifications are critical today, and also to form a prognosis of labor market demands for 2026. For us, it is especially important that the results of this survey do not stay just an analytical product. They are already used in practice, by the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Education and Science, and also international partners like World Bank, Skills Alliance, and many other institutions which bring their efforts into the development of human capital in Ukraine. The following slide, please. As for methodology, this is the biggest survey of employers in Ukraine. Next slide. Yes, and as they note from the room, it's not just in Ukraine, but even in the EU. As Yulia has said, this year, 61,000 enterprises participated out of 69,000 invited to participate. In total, they employ almost 4.5 million people. The sample is representative at the level of oblast with district level breakdown. It covers all sizes of enterprises and all NACE sectors. At the same time, the defense sector was not included, as well as enterprise located under temporarily occupied territories. So this scale and regularity allows us to talk about an objective picture of the labor market and to use this data as the basis for decisions, both on the level of state policy and also when developing training and economic recovery programs. And now I give the floor to Yulia Zhevtyak, Director of the State Employment Service of Ukraine, who is going to present the key conclusions of the survey. Thank you, Anastasia. I think that I'll try to manage the clicker myself. It looks like it works. Nobody helped me here, right? So, dear guests, dear colleagues, the results of this survey in the most important numbers. I'll repeat myself. The whole of presentation, you can find it in the QR code on your badge. It'll also be published on the State Employment Service website in 2 languages, so you don't need to take pictures of the slides. I have to note that in the results, there are comparisons between 2024 and 2025, because last year, as I have said, we conducted a similar service with the same partners. But this year, we managed to cover a bit more businesses. So today, we're going to talk about that. So we managed to cover 61,000 employers who have 4.4 million people employed in total. You see the number of respondents in thousands. That's micro, small, medium, and large businesses. And given more enterprises, we had more people who are employed there. And only you see that the number of employees in large businesses, it's almost 2,200,000 employees out of 4.4 million, which were covered by the survey in total. In general, because the sample was very big, you can actually imagine 61,000 records. And when we accumulated all that, you can draw a lot of conclusions, even those that we cannot include in this in one presentation. If you look at the survey, we have specific data for 2024, and for 2025, we have analysis for 10 months. So now we see that the prognosis for the end of 2025 is in significant growth. What it means that these companies that we have surveyed, according to their 10 months results, they could show the reduction in employees, but in the same one, they also are pointing out that until 2025, end of 2025, they plan to hire more employees, and they are going to reach a balance and even a small increase in the amount of employees. Then we present the biggest fields where there was reduction, both in 2024 and 2025. You see this: transportation, that's extraction industries, education, agriculture. The regions, we had the most reductions in Donetsk and Kharkiv region. No doubt that's logical, even though as of today, my colleague, who is the head of the Donetsk Employment Service, is actually in a business trip in Donetsk region. Donetsk region keeps living and working. Kramatorsk and Slaviansk, people are at their jobs, not just at the employment service, but actually they do work, the enterprises, the businesses, and so on. So Donetsk Regional Employment Service is actually in the system of state employment service and shows good work results, even given the dire situation they're in. Also on the slide, you can see employers and businesses who plan the growth in the amount of employers. That's the field of trade, extraction industries, administrative services, and energy. The regions which are going to have the biggest growth in employees, the Lviv region, Kiev region, and Zakarpattia region. That's a fact. But I mean that that's also logical, because it is these regions that had the biggest relocations of businesses from the east of the country. So that's why Lviv, Zakarpattia, and Kiev region lead in the increase of employees. What's also interesting, in my opinion, we can actually see the age of employees who are now working. For sure, we see, even though it is a small percentage, but it's not 1%, there are more employed people who are aged over 60. This is something we are all working on, to decrease ageism and to popularize this age category for the employers. On average, it's 25 to 60. That's the biggest part of employees. Unfortunately, there is a reduction of young people who are under 25. It's also pretty significant, -2%. Then in the conclusions, we are going to talk about that more. If we take the sample, 55 to 44 men and women respectively, and there was interesting information. Women who work in enterprise at, as they say, so-called male occupations. That's almost 2% of women. It's also little. But actually, we're now working on popularizing to actually destigmatize this process, so that a woman can work on a conditionally male occupation. Not everywhere, but still there is a positive trend here, even this year. Specific groups of employees. The percentage from the total workforce, you can see them. Foreign nationals, women in male-dominated occupations, that's what I have noted. 60 plus, combat veterans, IDPs, and persons with disabilities. There is a trend to have more employees in these categories at all enterprises. Also some interesting information, a willingness to hire in the future, short term, let's say in 2026, of the following categories. You can see how the result has grown for foreign nationals employment. Last year, only 14.9% of enterprises surveys planned to employ foreign nationals. This year, it has grown to 27%. Women in male-dominated occupations as well, 60 plus as well. Also significant growth for combat veterans and for IDPs, as well as persons with disabilities. I can say that last year, when we were finalizing our survey, we saw more or less 60 to 65% of employers who were planning to employ IDPs, people with disabilities, and our veterans. So this year, you see, it's more than 80%. So it means that this year we face the situation more and more that there is actually the deficit of human resources, and for sure we now have to work with our citizens who live in Ukraine. I don't like the word categories actually, and we should be working with any person who wants to work in Ukraine. Organization of labor, that's also interesting. We keep talking about remote work, stay-at-home work. You can actually see here that if you compare 2025 and 2024, and the general trend, still, physical on-site work remains on top and in priority. Over 80% of enterprises point out that their people all work in the offices, at the factories, and so on. And even there is less remote work compared to 2024. So if we take the reality, we all say that you can work flexibly and everything, but still a great amount of enterprise says that the work should happen physically on site. We saw an interesting trend this year, and we asked, like you all read analysis, that the world has been working on that, and many countries are trying to forecast the transition to a 4-day work week. We also asked the businesses whether they are ready to switch to a 4-day work week. The answer was no. So I mean, there is neutral, there is negative, there is technical, impossible. But if you just add up all this percentage, let's say about 30% of employers are ready to look at it, or haven't thought about working 4 days a week. But still, most 60+% say that this is either technically impossible or just impossible for them. So it was interesting to ask business how they actually look at these global trends. We keep working in Ukrainian reality, just the way we used to work. Market changes. What's positive that we see in market changes? In general, most enterprises envisage the increase in the production volumes. This tells us that in spite of almost 4 years of full-scale invasion, 10 years of the war, business has learned to work in these conditions, not just business, but also state institutions. And still, the relocation of enterprises has mostly happened to other places in Ukraine, so we see that the production volumes are growing. Why? The key reasons for growth are the increase in demand for their products, is the expansion of sales markets, and also modernization of enterprises. The latter is actually a key moment, because 11.5% answer that they are modernizing the enterprise. If they are modernizing the enterprise equipment, it just means that the number of people that they need for work is going to decrease proportionally to their modernization. Also, key reasons for decline in production volumes are, no doubt, is the impact of hostilities. For some enterprises, the decrease in demand, and also the increase in production costs. No doubt, increase in production costs is happening everywhere, given the reality that we see now, like the lack of power, the switch to power generators. In any field, it's true both for large enterprise and for small businesses like cafes. We have all at least seen the increase in the price of services the latest months. Among the enterprises that we're asking, unfortunately, 8.2% were damaged during the invasion. So that's also not 1 or 2%. That's a significant amount of enterprises, and we are noting that we haven't served everyone.
Just one moment, I will make sure that I don't miss this. Difficulties with the recruitment of staff. Enterprises indicated what difficulties they had. I am not talking about personnel shortage, because obviously everyone says that. I am also not going to speak about the recruitment of men. This is absolutely one of the key reasons why enterprises cannot work to full capacity now. But enterprises indicate the increased salary expectations of candidates. This is one of the biggest trends with staff recruitment, but we are going to talk more about that later. I am just checking to make sure I don't miss anything. Training and qualification validation. What was interesting here? It was interesting to see how employers actually feel about training and qualification improvement of their own personnel. 33, almost 34% have organized training of personnel at their enterprises. And quite interestingly, yesterday we spoke about this with the Federation of Employers. We speak quite often that it's not documents that are important, it's skills that are important, but actually 59 to 60% of enterprises said that the document confirmed education is important. So when we say that it is the skill that matters, it is true, the skills do matter, but still there is legislation and 60% confirmed that they need education certificates. As for forms of training used by enterprise, in the first place we have on-the-job training. Then we asked how they feel about qualification improvement and validation of employers. And we pointed out an interesting trend here that a lot of enterprises have this vague idea, hard to say, quite useful. They don't really know why qualification validation is important. Yulia Balnyuk is going to speak about this today, probably, because it's important to discuss. Just don't spoil everything. As for planned hiring for the next period. In 2025, enterprises planned to hire 112,000 employees according to the previous plan. For next year, 170,000. Out of those, we surveyed 67%, not 100%, but only 67% of those who planned to recruit new personnel did that actually. Why is that? Why do we see this trend? It's because when we speak about millions of people that we need to engage in the labor market, including foreign citizens, and when we look realistically at the sample of enterprises, the numbers differ. They are significantly lower than we speak about. We didn't survey everyone, obviously, probably some did not fill out the survey fully, but if we'll do even a small multiple, it's 500,000 people. Here are the top 5 regions that claimed to have the need to recruit employees. Dnipro, Lviv, Kyiv City, Kyiv region, and actually a number of enterprises are trying to switch from the raw material industry to processing, and it is clearly going to impact the structure of the market. The top occupations include drivers, mobile equipment operators, industrial equipment operators, teachers, workers in mechanical engineering, and other skilled trade workers. This trend is not surprising. This is a steady trend that we observe in the recent years, not only during the full-scale invasion. As for the work of the State Employment Service, 70% of vacancies that are available account for 105 occupations. We are going to work on this in more detail to make sure that all these professions are part of our active training and employment programs. I'm going to speak more about this later, but this is quite an interesting analysis. As for frequency of mentions of in-demand skills, what I mentioned before, look, tech is technical skills are most in demand one way or another. Organizational communication, interpersonal digital skills are also quite important. As for wages, the trend is quite good because the majority of enterprises, over half, are planning to increase the wages in the next year by 10 to 20%. I will come back to another interesting fact. Top 5 support measures mentioned by businesses. The biggest support that businesses organized at their enterprises include psychological support for personnel. In second place is transportation to the workplace, that's logistics that businesses have long organized to work, communication cost coverage, transport fare reimbursement, and health improvement and wellness are also frequently mentioned, but psychological support is in the first place. Something that we found particularly interesting at the State Employment Service, and actually I'm really proud of this result of our work. I hope our colleagues are also watching this broadcast. I'm thankful to them because it is actually our joint work. Enterprises that work with the State Employment Service actually are growing. I mean, over the years, the number of enterprises that work with us has increased over the past year. We carried out a survey last year, and we repeated it this year. And this year we also did a lot of work based on the findings of last year's survey. So it is really pleasant to see that we have 4.76 as the average rating of cooperation with State Employment Service by employers. And then there are areas of cooperation with State Employment Service. I often see situations of stigmatization of the State Employment Service. We keep saying that we are not an unemployment exchange, that we are a government service, that we help with recruitment. And 77 last year, 72% this year. Those are employers that use us for candidate selection. In second place are legal consultations, because we organize seminars, we engage other institutions in such seminars, typically tax services, and employers also have quite a high assessment of this work that we do, but employee training compensation programs are less popular. And when we discussed the results of this survey yesterday, we decided that there is never too much communication. We increased the rate of our communications, and next week we are going to adopt a communication strategy for the development of the State Employment Service. And based on the results of the survey, we understand that we absolutely do need to improve communication, not only among our target audience, that is the unemployed, but also businesses, because sometimes they don't know about the support programs available with the State Employment Service. As for the average rating of these areas of cooperation, they are also quite high, 4.15 for candidate selection and 4.27 for legal consultations, a bit lower for other areas. And the reasons why employers don't work with us, those that don't, 83% of them said they have no need for such a cooperation. 5% don't know how it can be useful, which is also quite a high score. 4% spoke about negative experience of previous cooperation. 7% say that cooperation creates additional workload, and there is also 1% covered by other. The issue that people don't know about our services, that's 10% overall. That's not enough, absolutely. So we need to work on that more. And now, what did we conclude about labor market trends based on our survey? Obviously, we wanted to speak not only about negatives but also about positives. And one positive is stabilization of employment and production. Even in the condition that we are in now, enterprises are maintaining production volumes and workforce levels without sharp fluctuations. That is, over 2 years, we didn't see a major shortage of employees, there is obviously still a deficit, there is still an imbalance, but businesses are planning to raise wages, they are planning to recruit new employees. So we can conclude that in the situation of martial law, we do have a more or less stable situation in terms of production. Acute skills shortages in critical sectors. The highest demand persists in healthcare, water supply, energy, education, and extractive industries. Demographic and occupational gender shifts. Young people remain underrepresented in the labor market, while the share of older workers and women in traditionally male-dominated occupations continues to grow. I believe that this is also something that all of us need to work on together very carefully, because indeed the number of young people is quite low relatively. There is a large number of young people who went abroad, and I think you communicate with people and you see that young people do leave Ukraine, but this is a signal for us that we need to work on our active employment services, because we do have bonuses for employers for employment of youth, but I think we are going to work with the Federation of Employers. We are going to look at large companies and ask how the government can help them to recruit more young people who don't have experience, entry level. I think we need to bridge this gap a bit after the survey, and you all saw that 80% of businesses are ready to hire people over 60 and are veterans. I want to say that despite this good result, we don't always see that implemented in practice, unfortunately, because it is not always easy to employ a veteran, it is not always easy to employ a person over the age of 60, but to be honest, the fact that this trend is growing is really optimistic in itself, but we do have something to work on. Growing labor market inclusiveness. To address skills shortages and strengthen workforce resilience, employers are increasingly open to hiring veterans, IDPs, something that I just mentioned, strengthening the role of training and social support. More than half of employers are investing in social programs and workforce development. We work a lot with private companies now. We have 120,000 employers working with the State Employment Service. These are the ones that file their vacancies with us. And when we meet up at forums, for instance, and when they speak about their personnel, they all say that they have their social support for employees. It's different case by case. Some start kindergartens right at the enterprise. Some set up additional social guarantees, healthcare assistance. They provide medical insurance, medical examinations, not only for the employee but for the entire family as well. Everyone has already realized that the issue now stands not only with looking for personnel, because previously there were like 40 candidates per vacancy, and now it's lucky if there are like 1 or 2 responses. So issue number 1 is retaining own personnel and setting up their work in a way that would not make people want to leave the job, leave the country, but instead make them want to keep working in these enterprises. And rising trust in the State Employment Service. I have to mention this because this is the result of a lot of work done by the entire team, and I think this is a small but still a substantial victory. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Julia, for the presentation, and actually I wanted to thank every employee of the State Employment Service and the regional centers for the fundamental work to collect data and for the regular communication with enterprises across Ukraine. I invite you to take a seat, and now I am happy to invite our moderator of the first panel discussion, Olena Kolesnikova, head of the Sustainable Development Committee of the Federation of Employers of Ukraine. Finally, I have a microphone and I can speak. Whoa, this is wonderful. Okay, I'm going to invite people that I'm going to work with by myself, right? Traditionally, Julia said it's the second year of this big scale, but actually the second year, because the first year we had 8,000 companies and we thought it was cool. Now that we have 60,000, we were like, oh, 8,000 companies, that's nothing. But traditionally, we have our first panel where we speak about how we move forward. And Julia is here in the research, and she was asking, do we actually need to speak? Do I actually have to take part in the panel? I said, absolutely, you have to take part in the panel discussion. And also, we have Oля Koval also present here from the parliament. And Julia already mentioned they have 112,000 companies they work with. I think that's the only institution in Ukraine that has this direct access to companies and can analyze everything. And we are basing our work off of them. Now have a table by Yuri Balanyuk, who saw the slide about qualification and validation, started taking pictures because we didn't tell him that we wanted to put that into a survey. And he said just 1.6% don't know about us. That's a win. Okay, he doesn't want to spoil his presentation. Okay, fine. We have the second year with Yulia Kirillova. When we met up with Yulia, we had everything very specific. Yulia said, we have problems 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go solve them. And we are trying to work on these issues for the second year now. I don't know if we are very successful, but you see the high percentage of enterprises that are ready to recruit veterans. So everything that you just saw in the slides, I hope you took note, because I'm going to ask you about all these things. Julia, my first question is to you, of course. We were discussing a lot of things that were included in the presentation, and you mentioned the excessive salary expectations. But do you remember our unemployment study last year? Do you remember the figure? 20,000, by the way. Look, this was actually less than the median paycheck. Actually, the people's expectations were aligned with the median monthly paycheck in Ukraine. So, in your opinion, we surveyed the unemployed, we surveyed the employers. What is missing from the government policy so that these people who are expecting this salary and the employers are ready to pay this salary, but they can't find each other? Why do you think there is no match? And what do we need to do to make sure there is a match? What do we need to do to have 100% employment? Look, the trend now is that if we sum up all of our work and we look at the employment and all active employment programs that we provide for citizens, for businesses, 70% of people that approached the service this year were covered by our services. They were either employed or they used training programs, retraining, further professional training programs, or they received business grants. Or another thing that is very in demand at frontline areas, temporary employment as socially important jobs. This is work done by our citizens, and they are paid for this, and this is mostly work that is necessary for the army now. A lot of women are making masking nets. I'm not even speaking about humanitarian aid. They are helping to clear up the rubble after the state emergency service, after shelling. So we are also actively working these programs.
So your question, actually, there is no single answer to that, because I actually do. I'm going to lead you to that answer. I'm going to say the following thing. When working with the State Employment Service, I remain on the same, probably my opinion will never change, that The first thing is good client service and case management. That's something that our citizens need. And second, like why is there's less of it, not enough of it? Is because not all people go to the state employment service because they believe that we have vacancies which are not a match for them because they all feature small salary. To answer this question, I can tell you that this is not true. Why? Because now we're working not only with the vacancies that are submitted by the employers, but also I would like to note what is our advantage, because all our vacancies are verified. They are realistic, official, and there's this official employment. But presently, we work with all opportunities that are in Ukraine today. I'll repeat, we have a single vacancies portal which has vacancies not just of the state employment service, but also leading work search websites. And yes, we see people who apply to those job search websites. When we look for people for businesses, we can actually we look at people who are registered as unemployed, and then we can look at people from the open market who, for example, submit their CVs to other job search websites, maybe trusting them more. And having an opportunity to call them, we also make them some job offers. Maybe I haven't answered your question. How many open vacancies do you have? In this service, it's 65,000. On the single portal, 200,000. 225,000. It's a different number every day. Okay, I was leading you on, but you didn't answer. Don't you believe that we don't have enough professional orientation for all those varied audiences so that they know what there is in their region and their country, what are the opportunities? Isn't that going to be an answer to improve the values? Like, for example, a person is unemployed and they don't understand like what's there, what are the opportunities, and if there were this systemic orientation, they would know about it and they would improve the percentage of employment. Here I would totally agree with you, because professional orientation is a fundamentally correct thing. But even if we build this orientation on all levels, still we're going to see the result, not tomorrow and not next year, because to correctly orient a child, you have to do that starting from kindergarten, then school, then high school. Then we have to look not just the institution of the service, because we mostly work with the unemployed, but also the Ministry of Education and the schools. Like, why do we have that human resources deficit? Why the young people have a hard time to find a job? Because they get professions and specializations which are not relevant for the labor market. Are there instruments in Ukraine to do that? Yes, there are instruments to do that, but in my opinion, we have to build in the education system, and especially for the end of grades 8 and 9, to have a sustainable practice of professional orientation to help a child and the child's parents, which is also very important, to find their way and what the child is more prone to. But again, that's a very good thing, and we have to finish building that, because the first steps have been made, but still there is no sustainable final. But still I believe that if we actually do it, we are going to see the effect from that. It's not going to be short term, but in long term we are going to see the results. Okay, Ola, yeah, a secret. Oh, they're going to ask me like what kind of questions I'm going to have on the panel. I wasn't going to tell them, because it's only like this we're going to get honest answers, and also we'll be preparing like what is correct to say. So all those answers are sincere. So a round of applause to Yulia, please. Okay, when we actually passed through this discussion in the working group, including that in professional education, do you remember what they were telling us? Yeah, I remember it very well, because actually the discussions were pretty big, and they were telling us that this research is not verified, it's not systemic, you cannot put such an emphasis on it. defining professions and qualifications. And actually, we're also putting this whole matter into financing and the commissioning of new experts in the professional education. But today's presentation, and I guess the systemic way of this research tells us that, well, I mean, I can tell you that for me personally, this probably as an only study that can be used and that you can rely on when making decisions. I'll criticize a little bit maybe when I open our state statistics service websites. I am beside with fear because logical or critical thinking just cannot explain the data that are published there. But often the state uses those data, and that is why sometimes we get some incorrect decisions and incorrect mechanisms to solve the problem that we have, especially when training experts, when commissioning them in universities and vocational schools. We have an outdated model for this commissioning of experts in the education system, and that is a very big problem. So these surveys are a very important part of the state mechanisms for decision making. And I would like to thank Olena and the State Employment Service that we still manage to document this service of the State Employment Service on the state level. It seems to me that that's the only thing, and that happened for the first time in the vocational training. And I'm sure that we'll be able to implement that into real mechanisms. At the beginning, okay, let's do it in the system of professional training, vocational training. I think that we'll manage to do it, and then we're going to spread this practice, and we'll prepare good and timely law on the system of state commissioning to train experts. Yulia was saying here about professional orientation. I was sitting there and thinking, for some reason we're talking about it only for young people. But for me, professional orientation is something more. Because we always count on helping the person before they are of age to choose a profession, but we have a huge category of people, and Yulia will confirm it, that those who even have an acquired education, regardless of the level, they cannot decide what could their career path would be. So in my opinion, professional orientation should be popularized among adults as well, and to involve them more actively into training, retraining, then continuous professional development. That's what we wrote in the law on vocational training. I think we managed to do that. We'll be implementing that later. I'm sure there's going to be some bugs that we'll be correcting, but still there is a foundation there, the basis, so that we are able to do it like that. So not the way that we managed to do it but still with the contemporary approaches, recognizing our mistakes and correcting them. But again, that's just a way towards development, and that's very important. So I would like to thank the State Employment Service. I would like to thank Yulia and her team, because here is the third time that we're gathering here, but I've been observing the activities of State Employment Service for an even longer time, and the service has transformed during this period into a contemporary system of support, job search, and providing specialists to the employers. Because in our society, they're used to thinking that the State Employment Service works only for unemployed. But that's not so. Our service works for both sides. And it's great that the number of applications from businesses, so involvement of business into this process is only growing. So huge thanks to you, to your team, and to our international partners, Helvetas in particular, that help our state in this process. Okay, Yura, you took a picture of the slide. What you're going to do with it? About qualification centers and all that. Only 1.6% of businesses said they didn't know what it was, but some answered, a very high percentage, they don't know what to do with it. So what you are going to do with it as the head of the National Agency for Qualifications? Actually, I wanted to say that it's not easy here to balance out in a gender manner, but I'll try. So, first thing to say, I believe that Yulia's words in the end of her speech that this is a small victory. They're incorrect. That's actually a big victory. And I would like to thank for that. A round of applause, this victory. So it's the evaluation of the real state of affairs. That's 50% of success in solving the problems that we can see also in front of Yulia and her whole team. So I would like to ask for a round of applause. Yet again, yeah, we didn't agree on it. Okay, and the second thing I wanted to say, just a year ago, I got a report and recommendations from the Institute of Strategic Studies that in Ukrainian society they know very little about the national system of qualifications, and the weak spot of the National Agency for Qualifications is popularization of activities, tasks, and decisions before the National Agency for Qualifications. So I'd like to say that the numbers presented in survey results, in particular that 1.6% who don't know what qualification centers are, and 27.7% of employers use the instrument to confirm professional qualifications. That's actually a great result of our joint activities of Helvetas, which ensure the information accompanying of our activities through the podcasts and everything. I would like to say that if it is so, these are the results, and these are the results presented. That's our joint success. What I wanted to say in principle about the activities of the agency and the results. So what is the dynamics? If in 2024, at the end of the year, we had 2,900 plus professional qualifications confirmed. So only in November, we have 801 confirmed professional qualification in the network of qualification centers. We have 194 qualification centers now in the country, but not all have the quality indicators from the point of professional qualifications. And I understand it because actually they are preparing infrastructure for implementation of vocational training system. We're starting from 2022, all graduates of third and fourth level qualification framework. I'm talking through the prism of professional information, that's namely vocational schools. So they are going to have professional qualification from independent qualification centers. And what is the potential for the activities with our international partners? That would be the capacity development of qualification centers in terms of their tasks. That's the first impetus, and the second impetus, and I hope that the labor code will factor in the needs of the employers and systematization of system as such. The third aspect, you know, colleagues, that the National Qualifications Agency now works on implementation of the law 9630, which envisages a single register of qualifications. Just stop here for a second. Remember this slide? 2,000 professions only indicated in the survey, but actually the deficit is just 107. So this tells us that there is not enough understanding what is a post, what is a professional qualification. And that is why you can sing. Okay, we have this manual regulation, as you can see. So actually what I would like to say, what's important in this whole process is that until the 2nd of May 2026, we have to compare, and that procedure is already there, but now we have to put the classifier of professions in the single register and work out the whole procedure so that all Ukrainian professions and qualifications contain international system of qualifications, ISCO. We also want to codify the European system of qualifications, SQ. So what does it mean? It means that in Ukraine, we'll stop just being a population through the prism of our international partners and predominantly European ones. Will be systematized and organized from the point of codification, because any products which are made in the EU are backed by human capital, and each profession or qualification contains a code. will be understood for them. And what's clear, together with Yulia, we're going to come back to that story. And when the vacancy is going to be formed in the future, there's going to be a drop-down menu to choose the code. So it will become systemic and understood. And the statistics then, which is criticized by Ola, then it will become objective, because we'll be receiving real data through the procedure of a single social tax, and moreover, we also know what kind of steps we need to make. The third aspect that I would like to mention, it's about professional orientation. I have a dream to make a construction club. If somebody from international partners would like to support me in that, please approach me. Okay, construction workers and international partners, raise your hands. I'll explain why I actually have this idea in the first place. Because we're all saying that we build and rebuild after war and during the war and all that, that will be rebuilt in the country. But I haven't found in Kiev a construction club for children. I haven't found for the future of Ukraine a professional platform for the orientation in practice to actually have a club like that. And we want to rebuild the country. That's a huge challenge, and I think that I'll manage it, and I will be supported by the Confederation of Construction Workers. I think they're going to be here today, and I'll be supported by the University of Construction. We'll manage it. So who among the international parties would like to support this idea, please? Mini Advertising Construction Club, or if you have kids, if they want to go to this club, you have to approach Yura. So, colleagues, I thank again the team of the State Employment Service and Yulia Zhevtyak, because when you understand what you are dealing with, then you're just going to know what kind of instruments you need to involve, how to communicate with the National Agency of Qualifications, the Parliament, or the Federation of Employers, then how to approach Yulia, what to show her, where is the potential of growth and cooperation as for veterans, and so on. And I would also like to tell you, and to give a bit of advertising, that tomorrow the National Agency of Qualifications, jointly with State Employment Service in Kiev branch of the State Employment Service, opens the first branch of the National Office of Europass and Euroguidance in Ukraine. So we'll manage to do everything, and glory to Ukraine. Yura has almost taken away my work of the moderator, almost give you the floor. But what I would like to stress on, remember, actually, there's going to be Daria Marchak with us. It's kind of a tradition, but she'll be a bit later. I always used to ask a question, the employer values were ready to do, and the percentage is growing. And Daria has always said, it's not right. They say that they're ready, but actually they are not. So I'm very proud that the following panel will be from business, and they're going to tell you for real what they're doing, and whether the number is the way we show it, or maybe we tweaked up the numbers a bit. So when you see the business value, the numbers which are ready to employ veterans, and it's growing, you actually saw a great dynamic since last year. What are you thinking about? Are we lying, or are we telling the truth? Greetings, everyone. Well, first of all, as a person who has work experience as a sociologist in the past, I would like to point out that's all socially desirable answers. You shouldn't treat it as something obvious that is already there today, because the employment of veterans, also thanks to the State Employment Service and the Federation of Employers and the National Qualifications Agency, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry for Veterans started talking about that almost from every window, that we need to employ veterans, and that is the human capital which is going to help to reconstruct our country. So that is why treating the answer as wishful thinking, I think it was 70%, now it's over 90%. I wouldn't do that.
Because veterans often speak about facing issues when trying to get a job, and they don't believe that employers are waiting for them. From our recent research, it's also the issue of trust for the employer who is proposing a job and for the environment into which this person comes, because okay, I'm just saying this as a veteran. During the service, we got used to having our people, like our team next to us, who we can rely on, and any step outside the comfort zone can be perceived as a threat. So we should also understand that the same story takes place in the civilian community. The question is whether people are ready to accept veterans as part of their teams. And when we see and ask about respect for veterans in the surveys, it's 96%. Like, people say yes, respect for sure. But when we look more deeply at the appeals we get at our hotline, we don't need to look very far. I think everyone saw this recent story on Facebook when the Privatbank wanted a veteran who didn't have arms to hold a card for a picture. Such simple cases are actually what is made up of people who respond to our surveys. So, yes, on an abstract theoretical level, they do respect veterans, but at this specific moment, I can act otherwise. I don't remember the figure, but I remember there is a bigger problem with the employment of men. I want to say that we have about 32 to 35 million people in Ukraine now. We don't know, but we think so. So we have about 14 million, 13 million, okay, 10 to 14 approximately million people who can work. And we have 1.4 million veterans. 1.4 million, that's only a specific percentage of our employable population. Is it fair that the attitude to our defenders after they leave the job becomes worse? Because yes, we really respect our defenders, but once a veteran comes back to their civilian life, for some reason, in public perception, they immediately become a socially vulnerable category of the population. This stigma needs to change. And I am thankful to the Federation of Employers and Helvetas, because we held a big thorough study as part of the qualification project, and we looked at all the experience gained by our defenders during service, because every war drives technological progress, and people who are there are the ones pushing it. They are acquiring these skills, and when they come back to their civilian lives, they can use them at work at our enterprise. They can modernize them, provide certain suggestions. Can I speak about a sniper who wasn't at our research presentation? I will tell you. When we started this work to translate the skills, I said, okay, let's say if a person repairs something, is clear. A tank operator is also clear. But what do you do with a sniper? And Yulia said, don't you understand what a sniper does? I said, well, a sniper understands what a sniper does. That's why it's very difficult for me to imagine what a sniper would do in civilian life. And she says that the sniper does the most difficult calculations in the most difficult conditions. So stress resilience, mathematical skills, analytical skills, physics, those are at the highest level. And I felt ashamed because I was working on these issues for so many years
and didn't even imagine it. I couldn't even think about this originally, so we put it into a separate category, non-obvious solutions, because they are indeed not obvious for a civilian person. Now we are working with them through algorithms to understand how to translate them into civilian life. So yes, indeed, that's a very good school, which actually provides you with an opportunity to change the paradigm of your thought. I often say that people who went through this school are capable of making decisions where there are no instructions. We are all used to having our job description, our algorithms, our guidelines at work. But there are situations sometimes when you don't understand what to do. You call your employer, and the employer says, I don't know what to do in that situation, and you need to assess the situation, make decisions by yourself. This summer we were in Kryvyi Rih at ArcelorMittal enterprise. We met veterans who joined the workforce, and I often asked, because as civilian employers, we often hear that a lot of time should be spent on them adapting, to have them organize their mental state. When you speak to veterans, some do need this, because we do have veterans who got major injuries, who are going back to civilian life because of health reasons. There are people who return to the workforce for family reasons. Some take care of family members who are sick. Some have their third or fourth child, and that's also wonderful news. And actually, we the most important thing is that we need to meet the most basic needs. We need to organize all the paperwork. We need to help with the medical examination, because you may not be allowed to work in your workplace if it is mandatory to have the medical examination, and so on. And a veteran who spoke with, when we asked how much time did it take to handle this and go back to work, and he said 1 day. I was used to communicating with veterans who would all say in a month, 3 months, and I realized that we need to take into account the needs of different groups. I will share a secret. We had training for the uh, employment service yesterday about veterans, and the main principle we discussed was that every veteran and every person is unique. So there can be one standard thing that works for everyone. So something that we learned yesterday and what we taught yesterday is that we agreed that we are all on the same page, understand these are individual routes, because we speak a lot about individual approach. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, Nastya. Maybe keeps texting me. Just stop. But I left my phone on my table deliberately, so I don't see those messages. I will ask a round of applause. We have two veterans in the panel, Julia and Yura both. And I'm proud of this. I will explain why. Because when they speak about what happened in terms of employment and adaptation, they know what they are talking about. And why are we lucky? Why don't we have fighting? Okay, we are recording. The jury is promising a fight during coffee break. If somebody wants to participate in the fight, please sign up with me. But in terms of teamwork, on a more serious note, I think that such a project with partners from the government, from the parliament, is something that really changes the country here and now. And I will quote Natalia Kalmykova, surprising as it may be. She says, "We are the only unique country that does it not after the war, but during the war, including the formation of veteran policy." When we speak about employment, what Julia mentioned today about trends, we are a country at war. Why am I focusing on this? Europeans often say we have this crisis, we have a 2% decline, and we are here during the full-scale war. We have no crisis. Julia says, we have stabilized the situation. We have an increase here, decrease there. So we are a unique country, and I'm very proud of this. Julia, are you proud of what we do together and what is happening in Ukraine today? Despite all the scandals, we like scandals as well. This is the Ukrainian tradition. Of course. Look, when I write posts about our work, about our activities, about my activity, at the end, I always end by saying I love my work. And actually, I do love my work. That is true. And maybe this is just my personal nature. I never stop. So I always say it's a small victory because you cannot stop. There are a lot of things that need to be done. There are a lot of things that we need to get done to ensure even better results. So lifelong learning. Okay, everyone understood. Good. Olia, look, people often say that as a member of the parliament, you forget that you're employed by the people. Do you like your job? I like working with this team of professionals with whom we have been working side by side for a long time. I like that we have these people who understand each other silently. When Olena starts talking to us, so we are like, Olena, we need, and she says, we already started this, we are doing this, and they start working with donors, with Helvetas, with other donors. We need to make changes here. I like that there are people who come to MPs who say, change something. I like that there are people who don't just criticize that, like, you are bad, it doesn't work like this. We see people who come in with solutions, people who will help you at a moment when you make a mistake, because we all make mistakes, we are all people. I will not quote the famous phrase, I have the right to make a mistake, but
Notably, those who work often make mistakes. I recognize this. Olena and I and Yuri often fixed a lot of mistakes, and we have an understanding of a lot more things that we need to change. But we see the results of this work. We see the results in qualification centers. We see the results on qualification validation. We see results with the employment of various categories. We see results in business satisfaction with the activity of government agencies. I will not mention legislation because nobody is happy. By the way, let's do the legislative study with our donors. It says everyone is happy with all agencies, but not with the parliament. And I say, Yura, we are not being beaten up, so that's already good. Jokes aside, I'm proud that we have this team with whom we are making a change and already see a positive outcome of these changes, legislative but also practical, the level of what we came up with. And this is all supported by research results. By the way, businesses will share in the next panel how happy they are. They will speak honestly. We'll ask everyone to speak honestly. Judy, look, I asked this provocative question, but I never asked it to you. How much time did you need to adapt? Frankly speaking, about 4 months. And my biggest feeling when I came back to work was that I had days off and I could sleep. That's not what you said. You said you didn't know what to do. Yes, I didn't know what to do during days off because suddenly you have an extra day in your week. I want to say one more thing. The story with the Azov video was quite prominent because Yuri Yakubovsky, who was the head of the directorate, serves in Azov, and he actually worked as the head of the qualification department with the National Agency. And there are people from that agency who also serve in Azov, current employees, former employees, so we also were involved in this. What I want to say, colleagues, is that I think there is an enormous number of challenges that are facing us all here in the room, here on the panel, but let's be specific. In what way? In the way that every activity should have a practical result that you can see, that you can find tangible. I think that the main result is that in November, 801 people received an extra professional qualification without additional stimuli. So this means that those people improved their qualifications just to make money and feed their families. And the main final result is that that person made money, provided for their family. That's the main result, because we can make a lot of plans, a lot of visions, a lot of laws. Elena, let's not get into the law issues, but the main result of everyone in this area should be the person. If there is a tangible result in the sector, this result is what we strive for. So I think that the National Qualification Agency, when it comes to implementing its job. By the way, I want to say hello again to the Ministry of Veteran Affairs, because they are the most dynamic developer of professional standards, and professional standards are the basis for the further activity and implementation of policies in cooperation with veterans. Because a veteran support specialist was reconsidered several times. We looked at specific qualification, looked at qualification distribution, but what Elena said, that other countries say, how do you do it during the war? We have no other way. We have a large number of people who already require support. And what is more, I will share this little secret with you, that yesterday we discussed that there is a part of specific labor functions that specialists should perform in medical institutions. So if any of our international partners can support the Ministry of Veteran Affairs in terms of development of these changes to the professional standard, where the specialist will carry out the support in medical institutions or on the line between medical institutions and when the person is already released. It is an important part of this expert's work. So as a person who understands it from within, I will ask you to participate in this. Okay, Helvetas is writing everything down. All requests for donors, Helvetas is recording that.
I think that in the end of our panel, it would be good if you say just one phrase, which I also really like. When we're talking about the veterans, you started it, but you haven't finished it. That these are not people who are vulnerable groups, but actually they are what for our country and who they are. How do you say? I really like that phrase. Okay, let me just make a joke. How this all started. Once, when we were talking about veterans about a year ago, that this is a vulnerable category, that they can do things, that it's hard for them to adapt to work. Natalia, my minister, was at the session and was actually telling us, you didn't do that. And I said, it's because I'm a vulnerable group. And since that time, that's how it all started. So they started treating it differently, and they started talking about it differently. That veterans are not a vulnerable category. These are the strongest people in this country who paid much more than just taxes to this country, and we're just obliged to understand that we don't have to do things instead of them, but still we have to understand and we have to treat this experience and to be grateful that these people at the time made a very complex decision for themselves. They sacrificed their health, their family, their youth, I don't know, everything, comfort, and went on to defend us, our country, and our sleep. So this gratitude has to be cross-cutting and pass through all fields in our life. We don't need to just throw things at them or create new benefits. We just have to, at a certain period, to give them an opportunity, to give a push, and they'll do it all themselves, how they used to do during their service, when they were defending our country. Thank you. A round of applause, please. And now I would like to add, this is really the most resilient category, and this is our best human resource. And we're saying, we're talking about the involvement of many foreign nationals, because I understand there is a potential which we are going to use. But I also want to say that all our people who now live in Ukraine, they are the best. And I believe that we're the best country in the world. So a round of applause to you and to them. It's too little. I want more. Okay, now thank you. So have we made it? Absolutely. And great. Thanks to you, Lena, for this dynamic moderation. Thanks to the speakers for being open and frank, and those professional thoughts that we heard today. Colleagues, we invite you for a coffee break and also for pics in the photo zone, because I'll remind you that the forum materials will be available, and you can find them the QR code on the reverse side of your badge. And I hope that in the nearest time you'll also be able to download professional photos from our team. To cover this event in social networks, we'll be looking forward to you in 30 minutes at 10 minutes after noon to continue our discussion panels, and thank you for your attention.
Шановні учасники та учасниці, вже за 3 хвилини ми розпочнемо другу панельну дискусію нашого форуму. Тож люб'язно просимо вас займати свої місця.
Please take your seats. We are about to start. We are about to start. Please take your seats. Dear colleagues, we invite you all to take your seats because in 1 minute we are going to start the second panel discussion. Dear colleagues, in 1 minute we are going to start the second panel discussion of our forum. We invite you to all take your seats. Dear participants, we are starting the second panel discussion of our forum, Human Capital and Workforce Transformation, what Ukraine needs to build a resilient and competitive economy. Today we are going to be talking about the positions of the business and the government, because a bit later we will be joined by the Deputy Minister of Economy, Environment and Agriculture of Ukraine, Daria Marchak. We are going to speak about what skills and specialties become key, how the approach to training changes, and what actually works during economic recovery. Allow me to introduce our speakers and invite them to the stage. Alexander Chervak, Director of the Confederation of Builders of Ukraine. Marta Kentres, Director of the IT Development and Advocacy Center, IT Ukraine Association. Vadim Shaharovsky, Chairman of the Association Union of Dairy Enterprises of Ukraine. Svetlana Mozhova, Director of Human Resources at the Corporate Partnership and Communication of the Agro-Industrial Holding Astarta Kyiv. And Olha Serbin, founder of the furniture factory Kyivsky Standard. Let's have a round of applause for our speakers. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for joining our panel discussion. You saw the results of today's study, and they clearly show that the deficit of workforce and skills remains one of the key restrictions for the economic recovery of our country. At the same time, businesses have to adapt already. They need to change the processes of manufacturing. We need to find a balance between automation and human capital. That's what we're going to speak about during the next hour. You know, I often see these thoughts of economic experts that making our economy more competitive is only possible if we make manufacturing more effective and efficient. As we saw, based on the research by the State Employment Service Helvetas and the Federation of Employers today, only 12% of the surveyed companies confirmed they are investing in the modernization of production. About 80% don't see or don't have this opportunity to do that because of perceived risks or actual risks due to the war. So I would like to ask, what is more critical to improve the competitiveness of our economy? Investment into the human capital or automation of production? How can they complement each other? Alexander. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Investment overall and access to capital, that's the primary thing. In our construction sector, the number one problem is the shortage of construction staff and staff overall. Investment into personnel is important, it's necessary. We sort of expect systemic solutions, but also rapid solutions. Rapid solutions include where we can engage women looking for additional jobs that can be created. We have courses supported by previously by USAID and now by other donors. Additionally, sad but true, the construction market mostly trains its personnel by itself. If we have a person, we are ready to teach them. And unfortunately, there are no systemic approaches, but we don't observe them yet. Recently, our colleagues from Transparency International did analysis on the construction sector, and only 5% of companies are large companies, 3/4 are medium companies, and the rest are small companies. Before the war, we had a deficit of workforce due to the migration. Now this deficit is not observed as much, but for the time being, but we are predicting this. Companies don't have HR departments, they don't have systemic approaches, so we are developing a methodology with our partners of how they can do this work as a sort of a draft work, a sort of groundwork to train personnel in the institutions that are ready to provide this. That's the first question. The second one is comprehensive work with uh, educational institutions. Like we have the high shortage in working professions in manual labor, the level of vocational schools, vocational education. There are issues with the institutions, with the quality of education, with us being unable to train people quickly enough, well enough. There are systemic problems in the construction industry, and we need to develop suggestions for the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Economy, and of course, maybe some pilot projects. As for changes in the training on the vocational level, there should be rapid courses focused on the job practice, internship. As time shows, maybe we need to reconsider the HR policy. We like the experience of Germany when a person first approaches the employer, secures a job, and then goes to learn, as opposed to training, even though you may not have any plans to work in this job later. We are working on that now, and you also reminded us of automation. Yes, we are looking at changes in the technology, things like rapid assembly metal structures. We understand that the shortage of personnel, like if hostilities suddenly stop and there is a peace building process, are we ready for this? In order to be ready, we are working on projects. We are looking at rapid technology, at automated technology that allow us to optimize the number of people working on the construction site without compromising quality and ensuring capital construction, which our population is also interested in. So to sum up, automation should take place where it is possible. The use of the best technology, digitization. There are operators of remote equipment. We are still learning how to engage them. We can also work on increasing the range of people who can be involved in construction work that previously weren't. Rapid education, training of personnel on the vocational level, and we also are interested in the so-called construction hubs, because we understand the problem with survival of vocational schools overall, but it's hard to speak about the quality of education when the same vocational schools train construction workers, hairdressers, cooks, waiters. For example, we are not saying these are unneeded professions, but we may be losing quality in this process. So maybe specialization would be more beneficial. Maybe the current reform to optimize vocational institutions would facilitate this, and we are going to provide our suggestions, of course, when it comes to the construction market. As for everything else, we are also looking at international experience. We are not scared of international personnel, but there are two challenges here. One is stability. If you recruit people from abroad, If you have a contract with them, you need to provide them with stable volumes of work and paychecks. Unfortunately, we don't have stability in our market. We have short-term prospects, but the minimum contract is 2 years. I think it's hard to guarantee that you will provide any person with 2 full years of work, and you will have to pay for the contract. So we are preparing. We are preparing the proposals, and we are focusing on uh, assisting businesses and the ministry to to become a pilot industry for rapid training of lacking personnel. Thank you, Alexander. And I would like Martha to share the situation in the IT sector because it's closely connected with the automation process. Hello. First of all, thank you for the profound research to our partners. Our association also carries out annual research of the IT market. It helps us communicate with the government sector, and it helps us build a strategy where to move and what vectors to promote. As for your question, about whether we need to invest in training or automation, I would say it should be synergy, and the victory of those 12% of companies that you mentioned, they will just be more competitive on the market compared to other companies. Those who understand faster and are ready to invest in digitization, those are going to win. We also know the strategy of population employment by 2030. So I feel that the sectors that can be digitized should start being digitized now. Alexandra already mentioned the peculiarities of the construction sector. I can also explain how digitization works in the agricultural sector. The operators can use drones to analyze the fields, to analyze the crops, and so on. They can use AI for this as well. So we are proposing to include on-the-job digital training in the last semester of education, and I think this would speed up the digitization process and help Ukraine survive in the conditions that exist now. The third stage is actual predictability. Why are people scared to invest during the war? Because of course there are risks, but we can speak about legislative terms, and that's a sphere where we can provide stability. If you don't know what will happen on the level of legislation, you cannot have stability. Thank you very much. And now I want to ask Vadim to represent the dairy sector. How does this sector find this balance between automation and human capital? I'm particularly interested in small manufacturers and small and medium enterprises. How do they adapt to the situation? Let me start by answering your question, and then I will use the opportunity to speak a bit about the dairy industry, because I want to promote my industry where I work. The issue of balance is the issue of economic expediency. I will share an example. I was in Poland, and one of the biggest manufacturers of dairy in Poland is a Polwiak company. They have 14 enterprises within the company. 10 years ago, they had 30. And when I asked the owner, Andrzej, why did you reduce the number of enterprises by half? And he said, Vadim, if the turnover is less than 50 million, that's just doesn't make sense for me. This other question was automation. What do you feel about automation? He says, I actually work on automation as much as I can. Why? We have a minimum paycheck of 1,000 euro per person. He said, I don't want to pay 1,000 euros, so I try to invest in automation as much as possible. In Ukraine, minimum salary is 200 euros. He said, okay, then for another 5 or 6 years, you can afford having a lot of employees. But I will come back to the industry. There are 35,500 people employed in the industry. Whether it's a lot or not, of course, it's not compared to the entire workforce. But at the same time, the industry provides 108 million turnover as of 2024, and 14 billion hryvnias have been paid in taxes. The industry occupies a small but important part in the GDP of our country, about 0.4%. In terms of workforce shortage, I feel that the industry can be successful when there is a strategy of development of the industry. And now the association is working this together with the Institute of Economic Modeling. And when we have this development strategy, that's when we can speak about success. The second point is human capital, and the third is finances. Because if you have human capital, you can always get funding. We had reduced labor shortage, reduced workforce shortage in the recent years. The war just sped up this process a bit. I have an enterprise and in Vinnytsia Oblast, I will not mention the name. There are 1,800 people employed in the dairy industry, and of them, 120 were drafted to the armed forces, 20 died, 16 went missing, 6 are held as prisoners of war. 67 still receive their paycheck from the enterprise. Obviously, they have a deficit of personnel, qualified and non-qualified. What do we do in this case? Our association was approached by some enterprises, and they were like, help us find a tech support personnel, help us find an office worker, but these are quite random requests. We started thinking, how can we train specialists to reduce this shortage of the workforce? The first thing was we made an agreement with National University of Food Technology. We created the first certification program to train lab workers. Every enterprise needs a lab worker, and a lab worker without education, that won't do. So this year we established this certification program, a 40-hour course with necessary payments, 6,000 per one specialist trained. I think this is quite reasonable, or even low. It should be more. So 2 people from the first round of the certification program started working at a dairy factory from that university. This was the first step that we took. The second thing is the issue of professional orientation. We talked about it today, and I can say that in Soviet time there were 2 universities training dairy specialists, the Odessa University of Food Technology and the Kyiv National University of Food Technology. How many do you think train them now? How many universities train dairy specialists now? 39. 39. Do you understand what I'm saying and what happened? We observe a degradation of training of dairy specialists, which is what leads to deficit. Because it was impossible to take this jump and to train qualified teachers during that time. So we need to take a step back, to go back to education, to look at universities and to reform our education to create basic universities. We actually worked with these two universities, and this year, for the first time, we ensure professional orientation. We invite students to visit advanced dairy enterprises. They were in the in the Helvetas factory, and all the expenditures were covered by the enterprises.
because they're interested to have new specialist training. So the third step that we made is postgraduate education. Unfortunately, most, even these two universities which I've just mentioned, pretty respected ones, they didn't pay much attention to postgraduate education. And as everything is moving forward, there is new knowledge accumulating. So postgraduate education is important. It shouldn't be left behind. We contacted a Polish university. They have the so-called postgraduate program, and in 3 specializations they train them. They are called production management, quality and safety, and combined products management. For 2 years in a row, our specialists are studying in this university. The cost of one specialist is 140 euro per year. This year, 3 experts are already doing that postgraduate education. I think that 2026 there are going to be much more of them because it was the first step that we made. We arranged our so actually this is the first which was actually those postgraduate education. They are very happy. Both the qualification, also the owners and the management of the enterprise where they work. What else? Actually, is the education reform. For now, we're just talking about education reform. The kindergarten teacher and the school teacher should become prestigious as professions, even though they may not comply with contemporary requirements now. I think the state should take up an obligation to pay them good salaries. Not like I've been reading here that teachers will have their salaries raised in 2026. In the first 6 months with 30%, and second 6 months is 20%. It sums up that the teacher is going to get about 25,000 hryvnias. You know, they won't teach anyone for this money. $1,500 to $2,000. That should be the average salary for people in education. Only then we can say that we're going to have really qualified human resources. We won't have the deficit. Let's take Ireland as an example. In 1970, they started their reforms from education reform, and look at them now. Is GDP. She is in top 10 of all countries in the world by GDP per capita, because so we can take the lessons learned by Ireland and extrapolate it here. Thank you, Vadim. And I would like to give the floor to Svetlana, so that on the example of your enterprise you could share what are the trends for the agriculture in Ukraine. And I remember that Marta was mentioning agriculture drones, for example. This is a vivid example of automation, and they acquire more and more popularity for our country in particular. So please tell us, like on your example, where is this balance and how agricultural sector feels now? I represent Starta. That's an agricultural holding, 7,500 people. 10% of those are now defending our motherland. As an HR director, on the one hand, I can surely say that human capital comes first, because no human capital means no automation. I think that here the answer is obvious. As a company which has its own company that doesn't just automate processes but provides IT solutions for managing agricultural businesses, not just for a startup but for the market of agricultural companies in general, I can say that it undoubtedly provides effort for business, but actually gives a totally different quality of work for their employers. But still, any automation always requires the increase in human capital. And the companies which actually come to mass automation, they have to count that they have to increase the number of employees. Uh, so because any introduction of changes is not just some technical things. Uh, this is the work of the experts. And for these big holdings, and actually it's an extremely complicated case because here there are cross-functional teams that treat changes differently and can work in different. We're not going to move away from it. We have to understand that still human ranks is because unprepared people who automate, that's not efficient. And unfortunately, I was unable to visit the whole first part. Very cool research, and I thank you. And it's not. I'm going to share it in my company and HR club as well. But I would like to say that in the state, that personnel is pretty complicated. If you all notice that the psychological load, the stress that people are in now, the work isn't productive. It has significant impact. And understanding the need for automation, we have to take in factor in the companies. Actually, we are among the biggest producers, agricultural producer in Ukraine. Yeah, actually, 350 tons per day. That's the biggest milk producer in Ukraine. We hope that of extra grade, by the way. I hope that we expand and you will move to processing from producer. Well, maybe 10 years ago, when everyone refused to do milk production, we even had a thought that we have to do that socially, just to preserve animal husbandry for Ukraine. And the last 5 years, it is a very profitable segment of our business. Just imagine the level of automation. We have kindergartens for calves, and each calf has a chip on its neck, like a sort of a leash, and there are bars where so there is actually a glass for the calf, and if the calf within an hour has drunk, they won't get more. If more, then they're given the glass. That's a therapy. I thought we should talk about veteran hub, that actually veterans could be brought there for some relaxation. When you visit that place, you are so emotional in a positive way. And for sure, this is a way. We as a company are working on automation, not just for ourselves, but for the market. We have a very good learning platform for the personnel, which we also share in our ecosystem, our developed courses. And I believe that now is the time for cooperation. And I think that today's meeting shows that then the state and the associations and business are getting together and they're looking for common solutions. In my opinion, a personal opinion, I don't really believe in those who come from with the workforce. I only believe in our people. I believe in our students. I'm going to tell. We have 12% of the companies. We have 60 plus years of age. A year ago, it was just 5%. So our people in dire situations from our communities, they come back to us to help the company in this complex situation, understanding that in agriculture and villages, let's be honest, mobilization is much more active. And we understand that we have to support the army also by letting our people go and our employees to actually perform this important mission. And just 5% of young people that we have, and that's also a question. And also here, I would like to note that the cooperation has become much better with the vocational schools. And in our opinion, the training also becomes better. And in general, the teams are ready to work more. There's more dual education. I can't say that that's enough. But for sure, there's progress, there's dynamics, and there's something we can feel. I have a question as how the state works with the motivation. So remaining to work in these professions. We look, only 20% remain at work, and there's a huge part that people just go and get education without understanding why they're getting, how they're going to work after that. And maybe the experience of our foreign colleagues is pretty efficient. When children in the beginning of studies for a month or two, they are in the enterprise, they form this understanding. Afterwards, they study in a more conscious way. And we get students with whom we work, both in motivation and additional training and forming their outlook in general and meanings in life, so they understand what they can get in the state by remaining to work in the regions and forming these family relations, that you can work in your village without going and actually develop not just in professional and vocational training. You can be in agriculture, IT, or in finance person in agriculture. We have great practices when people grow inside the company, from regular workers to managing professions. I mean, this is all on the shoulders of the business, which does it efficiently. But for sure, it's going to be more efficient if it's going to be developed at the state level as a program. So without internal understanding, without motivation, nothing is ever going to happen. Thank you, Svetlana. And I would like to address you, Olga, as a business founder. Could you please share your reality, using your business as an example, how you define these priorities? Greetings. My name is Olga. Should I hold it closer? I'm the founder of Kievsky Standard Company. We're among 5 leaders of serial production in Ukraine. As for automation, I side with Svetlana here. Automation should take place in sync, both with human resource and with automation. We have started automation at our production in the company more than 10 years ago. Yes, at production, it has radically eased the work to the employees. We stopped being dependent on the greatest experts, but for all this scale up, for all this growth of automation and people, we came across the need from controlling bodies, so to say. Yes, we needed people who would control this scale up, this huge amount of people who are working as like robots. So yes, robots are there. Like, they would pass you the spare parts, they work with barcodes, they clearly know where do you get this spare part, where do you put it afterwards. But control is still necessary, because no matter the automation, people are people. So I don't know what else I could add about automation. I mean, yeah, we invested a lot in it, but what has helped us today, as for the human resources, is that thanks to our automation that we have in the present time, we have significantly saved on training unqualified workers. Like our time of learning is like 10 days max, because all the other works, they are done in the office. Thanks a lot, colleagues. And to continue our discussion, I wanted to say that in the framework of our research, we heard the following numbers. The 60% of businesses need a document on specialized education. Very often they say that the main thing is to have skills, to acquire a certain profession. But if we actually pay attention to that issue, in your opinion, which model of workforce development is now the most efficient, using your sector as an example? We have already heard several opinions from Alexander and Vadim. You were emphasizing that very often the quality of studies is blurred. If we're not talking about specialized vocational school that teach specific profession, what other models are possible? I mean, there are vocational training schools, there is a system of retraining in the state diploma service. There are some corporate training programs under the umbrella of big businesses and enterprise, and also other programs of informal education. So what works for you? Okay, let me continue. Okay, I'll continue. Well, the main tool of overcoming HR deficit in our production was internal corporate school on the basis of production. I mean, we've created the lines, we put those places, we created conditions, we created teachers who took up unqualified employees, who took up employees who need to be requalified according to the needs of our production. And an important moment was paying for each day of a trainee, payment for studies. So this actually caused a great influx of human resources. Not everyone remained, I'll honestly say. Not all trainees remained, but most remained. They already had money to get to work, to buy something to eat, and they were already fine with that. So that was the initial capital of sorts. Yes, the schools, our schools, helped us work with the category like women and youth. And also, they actually told us that women and young people, they need to have conditions for physical loads. So what we did. At the production, there are conditions for easier physical work. So corporate schools, at least in our case, that's the leading solution. Yes, that's true. It's really true. I'm not saying that other instruments don't work. The instruments that you don't work. That's it. If you use all instruments, then all of them work. It's just that some work more, some work less, depending on where you invest your energy in. That's the rule. So our following instrument, which we're especially proud of, is the cooperation with the universities. And thanks to our own efforts, students actually had a real furniture class with equipment and with materials, a real one. And we constantly invite and we take children for production practice. I can tell you that as a result, after getting a diploma, these children do come back to us for production. Yes, they train a bit more because they already become of age. So they do some some additional training and they become full-fledged team members. But we haven't stopped on that. This year we initiated new professions for national classifier for the furniture field because they exist. I mean, the profession of furniture specialist doesn't exist because, like, there is a construction worker, but there is no furniture expert, you know? So we actually want this profession to exist. We are going to achieve that. And I really believe that in May we're just going to have big boards all over the city about our training school that you can go and get a professional furniture expert to work in our company with guaranteed employment in our company. And yes, also the last two. It's not about production really, but it's still actionable. It's no less important to work in internal marketing of the company. In particular, there's a regular guided tours to the production for students from different schools and educational establishments. We have buses of kids. They walk around, they learn. We also give them booklets with some gifts, even chocolate bars. And they leave us with great smiles on their faces, like, what else do the kids need? Our experts, responsible people, even give the children, of course in safe conditions, they allow them to work, to show how that's already safe today. I mean, it has its incredible size, but it's still safe. And children, they leave very happy, really great mood, and then they tell their parents about that. They pass the booklets to the parents, and then the parents contact our HR department. That's easy. Yeah, that's a great solution. Also, our company supports social and professional events in the city. In our city, we work on creating a strong life brand of the employer. We put all our effort into that.
Thank you very much for this practical experience, Svetlana. Over to you. I would divide this question into two parts. First, to provide ourselves with a workforce. First, we need to have them in the company, and then they should have the necessary level of qualifications and knowledge to perform the necessary tasks. So I will share the engagement channels in our company. 40% is the work of recruiters and HRs. Every company has a certain period for filling vacancies. It's increased, not just doubled, it tripled. Maintaining the website is also expensive for the employer. 40% of labor of workforce transfer is bring a friend, so we pay our employees for referring their friends and acquaintances. So you announce a vacancy, somebody brings in a colleague, and after they successfully go through the internship period, the trial period, the reward can be 4 to 20,000, depending on the salary of the colleague. Up to 20% is the internal growth in the company, promotions, and this requires a lot of work of successors and mentors, and companies spend quite a lot of funds on this. But we took it one step further. We have a large project, Your Profession in Agriculture, where we work with communities. We work not only with children, we have a licensed training program in the ministry that includes agricultural units, greenhouses, our employees train students. By the way, we saw a case when beetroot was actually better in this training environment than in the field. But we first work with parents, encourage them to go to vocational schools, and then we work with the schools themselves. We see a positive dynamic in the willingness to work, and if there are donors here who provide funds for such programs for universities, I want to say that those vocational schools that have a good material base through grant programs, that have a director who can engage this, they know how to motivate students, they know how to train them. The students are willing to work. So this is a niche where we need to work. I'm thankful to all the international donors and to people who have the courage to promote it in Ukraine. This provides a good result for the business. Business cannot fully undertake the responsibility for funding this sector. We provided 570 grants to communities for the development of small businesses and self-employment over the past few years. We also help communities develop not only agricultural business, we just try to make sure that there is infrastructure so that people actually want to live there. There should be rehabilitation centers, beauty salons, stores, cafes, furniture production. Businesses should also ensure that as well, because young people who come to the village when they have children, it's great. Let them have as many children as they want. They should be able to provide those children with development opportunities, with self-fulfillment opportunities. So on the one hand, we need to engage people into the company. On the other hand, we want them to be effective. Without training programs, no business can help. And with the rate of change that exists in the company, the use of new tools, businesses actually have an enormous task facing them. In addition to having a job description, KPIs, every employee in a company has additional projects that are cross-functional in terms of training. We have every manager who needs to be aware of the functions of their subordinates, and the subordinates should also know the job of the manager. It is a large workload for the business. Some handle it better, some worse, but I can say for sure that over these years, the agricultural business took a giant leap and is training not only its own employees, but also employees in communities. So businesses do use all tools they can, but without donor assistance, without engagement of the government, they cannot do this. I think they are investing more and more, but they absolutely cannot handle this problem by themselves without systemic work. Just one more thing, and I'm wrapping up. I asked a question. I have this employee who is actually responsible for work with the students and internships, because we had a week of adult intern at our enterprise. Darina Marchak will be here. It is actually her idea that we already piloted, and 50% of our interns who were 60 plus stayed at the job. So we provide internships not only for young people, but also for older people as well. And thanks to the donors, thanks to government programs, we will be able to unite and cross that bridge, what we can say as a country, as Ukrainians, that we can provide ourselves and ensure sustainable development of the country and of businesses. Can I follow up a little on what my colleague said? She mentioned that they have 12% of people 60 plus and 5% of young people. 25%, sorry. I think that's a good balance, because I don't like this terminology of 60 plus, because in the dairy industry we say vintage. Vintage means mature. So I suggest that these people who are 60 plus, we call them vintage. I am vintage myself, so I think we should achieve a smart balance between who can train young specialists and who can work in the company. Actually, as for a startup, I only have words of praise for them, because I personally know somebody who joined the startup as a financial analyst, and now they are the financial director. It's Vyacheslav Chuk. He is a member of the board of the Association of Dairy Enterprises of Ukraine, and also a member of the supervisory board. So the personnel policy in Astarta is exemplary, I would say. Thank you as well. Thank you very much, colleagues. Let's also hear from you. My question was, I'll remind you, what model of personnel training is the most effective for your sector? I will flip the question a bit. There can be different ways to train people. First, we need to understand who needs to be trained sector by sector and try to make predictions for at least a year or two. We are now going towards the EU accession, and there are two directives, GDPR and NIS2, in the EU. And if these directives are implemented and they are mandatory to join the EU, there will be the position of a personal data protection officer who is employed by every enterprise providing services online. And there is also a necessary position of cyber expert at the enterprise who could analyze all data and make sure there are no leaks. Now the head of the State Special Communication Service says we have a shortage of specialists in this sector, and the law currently says that such specialists are only needed at state enterprises and critical infrastructure. How will this shortage change when this is about private enterprises? We can only imagine. So we need to think about this now. We need to introduce a broader list and explain to children what prospects it opens up. We spoke to our participant about salaries that such cyber specialists have. They are very high comparative to the market. So I think that we can look at situations like when one specialist provides services to 5 or 6 companies. That would be the physical capacity, but that's something where we need to look, and we also need to form the specializations about this. As for propaganda in schools, in a good meaning of this word, we are now working with the charitable foundation Children of Heroes, and together with large IT companies, we have introduced professional orientation training in schools for children so that they can understand what IT actually is. Because according to recent data, professions of a lawyer and economist keep winning. Now, psychology is becoming prominent, IT is in the fourth place, but unfortunately, children don't understand the prospects of joining working professions, manual labor, and this is also something that associations specializing in certain sectors could do. One thing that we understood following the presentation is that children would make a presentation what profession they want to do. Children still don't look for easy ways. They want to become designers. They sort of try to pick the easier path, but that's still good because in that case, at least you have some understanding of who you want to be and go to university, yes, or to a vocational school indeed. So that's also an important element to make predictions for the future and promote professions that may be not as popular among children. Speaking about IT overall, there is a constant continued training. You cannot work in the same specialization for years and years. Companies, especially large companies, tend to help with the further training of their specialists, and this growth logical takes place. Thank you very much, Marta. Alexander, what's your idea of this? I heard a lot of thoughts. The government is not doing a good job promoting certain professions. That's why businesses are doing this. I shared an example several times about promotion of jobs in the US. The one motivation is the money, and the rating of universities is based on how many of their graduates work in prestigious companies, what is the salary they receive, and if you looked at the public statistics on the construction sector, you would see that construction workers can get more money than a marketing specialist, lawyer, and that's not only the case in construction. As for the quality of education, I understand that it's difficult, there is a war, but we are still reaping what we sowed during COVID times, during the remote education back then. The quality is just not comparable in universities, in vocational schools. So if we speak about what the business requires, if this is an engineering job, of course there should be a confirmation of a diploma. There should be a confirmation that a person acquired certain knowledge and skills. As for working professions with manual labor, the shortage of workforce is so acute that they will accept anyone as long as they are physically able to do the job. And I know several companies that completely retrain graduates of vocational schools. Okay, you know the basics, and now in a few weeks you will learn how we work, you will learn our technology. It would be good if we had enough people, but unfortunately, if there are not enough people, we do what we have to do. The risk is that in construction, the vintage people are a bit difficult to engage. And a new risk that our companies are facing, there is also the political factor, and the reality is that the government allowed young people up to the age of 23 to leave the country, and thus our every company lost about 10 to 15% of the workforce. People went abroad or people joined the military, and this caused a new wave of the workforce shortage. As for our association of construction employers in Poland, they said in 2025, out of the entire group of people who came to Poland, 125,000 were ones who worked in construction officially. The unofficial component is even higher. Last year, only 25,000 out of them remained in official jobs, but the others achieved enough success in Poland that they moved on to other countries in Europe. That's some of them, but the majority started their own private, small private construction companies in Poland and created this construction segment of the Ukrainian origin. So what am I saying here? If we have the motivation and the political will, we believe that people, particularly construction workers, may come back to Ukraine so that we can have qualified personnel. In Europe, the standards are sometimes higher, but we can absolutely encourage our personnel to come back only when there is coordinated government policy in this area. But you listed various forms of training, and I think that during the deficit, every form is important. Vocational schools, qualification centers, even rapid courses. Before the full-scale invasion, we had the official market of professionals and unofficial. We had about 300,000 construction workers before 2022. Officially, they were actually a million. If we look at some large forums with workshops by large manufacturers, we see that people come not to courses at qualification centers or vocational schools. They go to workshops, they learn a new technology, and they keep using it. There is tax optimization, there is net income, there is demand, and there are recommendations, and that's enough. Unfortunately, that's how it works. And here our goal is to systematize this, to motivate people to use official pathways. We are now looking for partners for pilot implementation. And another thing, vocational schools are our partners indeed, but the issue with vocational education is that it is sort of sub-brand. Companies that can afford this invest into vocational schools, but they invest in them based on their technology and their brand, and this also affects quality.
because, for example, a brand uh, set up a workshop in the vocational school based on their technology and their equipment. Then the graduates, like 5 of them, joined the companies that funded the studies, and the other end up in the labor market, and they don't know the technology of other companies. They need to retrain essentially, and that's why we are saying that there should be unified construction hubs, training specialists who are ready for various types of technology, various types of methodologies in construction and in production in particular. But everything can happen over time. By the way, here we hope that the government will be ready to listen to us. We will help to implement everything because we understand that ministries also have a shortage during the war, during the shortage of personnel. So we are ready to help as long as they are ready to listen to us and pilot the ideas of businesses, believing that they can also be relevant and useful to implement.
Thank you, colleagues. And meanwhile, we have Daria Marchak joining us, Deputy Minister of Economy, Environment and Agriculture of Ukraine. Daria, I would like to ask you to join our discussion, but addressing our participants, we would like to say that we wish to make our discussion interactive. So if someone has questions, please think about those. There will be an opportunity for 2 or 3 questions from our respected audience. Daria? We've been discussing a very interesting question that we've been discussing with you and representatives of the Ministry of Economy, which is about efficiency of training providers. So what is the model for the development of workforce is now the most efficient? And actually, the representatives of business associations and enterprises spoke about something what works best for Ukraine. Is it colleges, vocational schools, or is it systems attached to the employment system, or maybe some programs that exist directly in big business or some other informal training? It would be very interesting to hear your opinion, your expert opinion from the point of the Ministry of Economy. So what is going to work the most efficiently for Ukraine? Thanks a lot. Well, first of all, I would like to thank for this study and for Helvetas supporting us in the process of reforming our Ukrainian system. Secondly, I apologize for being late, and I'm happy that still I managed to join you despite my difficult schedule. Too bad that I haven't heard the previous discussion, but still, I looked through the slides. I thank you for them. And in the context of the slides, actually, something surprised me a lot. There were some positive surprises, like a growing positive assessment of the employment service. I don't see the colleagues here. Oh, you do. There they are. Valentina Rybalka, for example. That's a compliment to you and your work. But, for example, as for the efficiency of training programs, I don't know if according to the methodology it was evaluation of all of those or specifically state employment service, but as far as I remember, it's lower than 4 points out of 5, and actually we feel in general that as a country, because if actually had efficient work over training programs, then I think there would be less discussions in all sorts of circles. So the reform, it may not be like a super big reform, but still the change of approaches from the way how we actually move to with the scaling of employees, that's a very important direction for us. And we studied that issue from several sides. And first of all, there's a question like, who is the provider? I'm used to working with the numbers and data. It's hard for me to actually approach this position, political decisions, when you don't understand the basic numbers. I was trying to find information about like how actually this market looks. I haven't found this study. I address Helvetas, and I thank you a lot for supporting me, and I hope that now we already have the TOR and there's an organization that does this survey. I hope that in January, in the end of January or in February, we'll be able to present the results of this study. But what I want to see here is actually the mapping of service providers for training and Ukrainian. When you don't understand who is there on the market, how can you understand how to regulate this market? And obviously, the market is extremely decentralized. That's how I would describe it. Nobody sees it, how it looks in total. Nobody understands what are the programs at the market, what they are focused on. Is it soft skills or hard skills, or are those problems for engineering? Or is it, I don't know, psychologist training, like 2-week courses? We don't see that. So therefore, until we don't see it, it's very hard to work with that. So the first thing we're working on is mapping providers, service providers, and also training programs. When we see this information, it's going to be easier to move on. The second thing we're working on, for now, that's my educated guess. But I believe that mapping is going to confirm that, is that we are pretty chaotic in financing the system of these training programs without a specific goal or understanding how we as stakeholders together work, because there is a state and the local authorities and also the employment service and the private training institutions and the donor community. So we need to understand who we are financing, through which available tools, so what is the volume of that market, and all these funds, yes, as a result. And actually, the second thing that I put as a goal for myself, that would be to change the mechanism of money circulation, and so that the money follows not only the employee, but also the employer. If an employer feels a problem with the lack of human capital, so that they know if they find a candidate who is a match with 70, 50, or 80%, and that candidate has to be additionally trained, that we don't just spend the money for some retraining, but that we're going to retrain this candidate specifically for a potential workplace. So that's another important element. The third important element, which is directly associated with the second one, we have to introduce the money follows person, and actually we have to learn to identify the needs of the employers. I believe that this is a big gap now that we have in the retraining system, because we know that, for example, there is a startup company, there are some big businesses. If there are big businesses, there is a consolidated HR function, and we at least understand that, for example, companies, I think it's in Metinvest, that they have several thousand vacancies, I mean. So the issue is that we have a lot of SMBs who sees their needs. So actually, what do we do with the SMEs? I don't know. We don't have information from that. Actually, we invest money in retraining. Do we see that the retraining is going to be efficient for the employment of a specific person? Because for this post, for this knowledge, there is demand for the labor market. So, and the last important block that we started working with, and I really hope that, for example, in January we'll be able to present some first results, that would be actually the demands of our post, not just today. When we talk about retraining, we're talking about the future. It seems to me that very often when we invest in retraining, we forget about the future. Like we're thinking of aiming at now, sometimes we're aiming at the past, because we finance programs for qualifications which were relevant 10 years ago and not relevant now. And for me, it's actually very important to finance the training that's going to be necessary in 5 or 10 years. And we need to actually, how to understand that. In Western countries, in developed countries, there are models for forecasting demands at the labor market. In Ukraine, we're doing that for the first time, again with Skills Alliance and Annabelle, with the support of Belgian government. So we did a study to forecast how the demand at the labor market is going to look in 5 to 7 years. So now the task is to disaggregate this result, like who we actually have to start training now. And if we learn to actually do this evaluation now, or for example in the future, or if we tie our training programs to those needs, then I think we'll be able to start balancing our demand, supply and demand. And the last statement that I wanted to make is that when we're talking about players, I'm convinced that we should have absolute equality as for like who can provide training for this money. And I'm all for saying that we shouldn't have this kind of advantages for the training centers, so that the market should be open for all providers. And I think that we should have competition for the professions, like how much they are in demand at the market, that you can actually train the people, how quickly you can train the people, what will be the quality of the training, and of course what's the cost of the training. Because what I see, again, there are training programs where a person is trained for some specialization, like for 8 months, for a year. I know about 2 years even. Until we're retraining people, if that person stays unemployed all this time, like how this person managed to live? Maybe we just make it more compensated as training programs and do so that what we train like in 8 months, we can train in 3 months, and the person is going to faster enter the labor market and will be able to support themselves, so will be less financially dependent on the state. So it seems to me that we have a lot of work to do. What actually makes me very happy that there are players who are already doing that work. This means that if we now consolidate all efforts and simply, very clearly get synchronized with our tasks and like what does everything, and not to just stumble in the same direction, then we'll be able to rather quickly rebuild this market and make a system out of it, which actually will train good experts for the labor market. And add that, sorry, I'm just going to tell you everything that I have in my head. We're now only talking about retraining when, for example, we need to find a job for the person or put to transfer to some post. But actually training, it should be lifelong learning as a state policy and philosophy. Also the policy of the employer, because in the end, that is converted in the productive work of people, and productivity in our country is very low. People work a lot, but the output per one unit is, for now, very small. A key factor for productivity is the relevance of knowledge and skills, and that's why I'm convinced that after we rebuild the market for the retraining system, solving some urgent issues, afterwards we would need to build a system in which this retraining system will identify everything, all new things that a person should know, immediately should be put in all the training programs and also integrated, so that people and people's knowledge, they actually serve as an impetus. They don't hold them back, but instead that they are a stimulus and they help us all grow. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being with us. Thank you, Daria, for your speech and for our fruitful cooperation. And now I would like to... Yeah, for sure. Sorry, without the mic, there is no interpretation. Okay, colleagues. I would like to use several more minutes to give an opportunity to our participants in the audience to ask questions to the speakers. Maybe you can also have some comments. So if you raise your hand, yes, please. I have a question. You're saying that you're trying to forecast 5 to 7 years ahead what's going to be necessary. Like, does business understand who they will need in 5 to 7 years? Small and big business alike. I'm just interested how businesses look at that and who they would like to see. Look, we're talking about different models. If there's a question to me, maybe it's a question to Svetlana. Okay. Just one small remark. It seems to me that we have different focus because actually we have to look at the labor market depending on how the economy structure will change and also what the government wants to achieve globally. Probably every separate business cannot answer this question. The business is going to answer for itself. I can answer. Business surely has some assessments, it understands what kind of skills will be necessary. The strategy may change. There could be new projects, but if we talk about the 5-year perspective, then 90% yes. Well, Daria, you were saying actually those training centers which are in business, they can also be market players and get a commission from the state to train their place and actually employ those people. So yes, we're ready for that. That's great, Alexander. Yeah, we just need the state to be ready. Actually, we also ordered a survey with our partners, GIZ. It's going to be deeper, and we're actually focused on small enterprises, on small and medium enterprises there, because there's the basis of construction business. The business understands which professions we need. I can tell you, for example, I often quote this example, maybe something has changed, but since full-scale invasion, there is much more demand on monolith and concrete works, like for fortifications, shelters. So the Ministry of Education says, like, we have colleges that train for those professions. In 4 years, they have not a single person graduated with that specialization. So in our survey of focusing, like, what are the construction professions that are lacking now, so that we actually could form a demand for business, so that we don't graduate. I don't say that it's not necessary, like no monolith worker, but somebody who just works with the tiles. To form state commission, there are different tools. And then, as for Germany, what kind of structure they have? What I saw, you go to the employer, first you look for work, then you train. In Germany, there are 10 coordinators for the whole Germany that form the training of construction field. And they get demands for business, they refer people to training, yes. They have 6,000 students. But the 10 coordinators are enough to provide for the needs of about 100 million population in Germany, being a leading and highly developed country in Europe, just as an example. Without the microphone, there is no interpretation. Yeah, there are comments inside the room. Probably you can't hear them in online format, but maybe our speakers would like to say something more on forecasting. Yeah, if you take us and we have plans for our development and for our upscaling. We clearly know what kind of professions we're going to need in 5 to 7 years. The problem is that they don't exist in general in the state. Actually, as you were saying, we understand the skills, so that's why we create those professions internally and we develop them. It's not just about the state being unable or unwilling to train for these professions. The state needs to find out that there is demand for those professions. And I can say that obviously there's a systemic problem with collecting the needs among the business. And that's something that I was saying. It cannot be a manual instrument in the beginning. It may be manual collection of requests, but globally it should be an IT solution where, for example, business regularly submits its needs for some prospects. Okay, thanks a lot, Marta. As for IT field, we see the trends, and based on those trends which are developing, we can forecast which experts are lacking. Now in 2025, we saw a trend in reduction of junior specialists due to AI development, but instead there is much greater demand for professions like AI coordinator in the business system to organize all processes, cyber experts who, as I said, with the development of directives and implementations. DevOps is also hard to find them because these are expensive experts and you have to reach it. So we can also forecast who will be necessary at the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our dear speakers for such an insightful conversation that shows how important it is to consolidate efforts to improve the situation on the labor market in Ukraine. Thank you particularly to the Ministry of Economy for the development of population employment strategy, which is a very important step towards further reforms and further progress. And thank you to Helvetas, the State Employment Service of Ukraine, the Federation of Employers of Ukraine. Thank you for united efforts to restore Ukraine's economy. I want to remind you that the forum was organized as part of the project Resilience Development of a Sustainable Labor Market in Ukraine that is implemented as part of an agreement between the SIDA Agency for International Cooperation with the support of Sweden and the research that was presented today was presented as part of the project to improve the resilience of communities affected by the war in Ukraine, funded by the Federal Ministry of Economic Development and Cooperation in Germany, BMZ, and implemented with partnership with JIWA. Dear participants, there is a QR code on the flip side of your name tag where you will find the materials of this forum, including the presentation of this research. The full text of the research will be available shortly, as well as the photos from today's event, which we encourage you to use for publication on social media. Here, I would like to invite our on-site participants to have coffee, and our online participants I would like to thank you for your cooperation and for your participation in our event. Thank you.